Are you a current or future physician assistant wanting to learn more about finances? Then join me on this journey to become a PA the FI way. Hi, my name is Kat, and I'm a practicing certified physician assistant who will be your host. It took me 5 years after I started practicing medicine as a PA to thoroughly dive into my personal finances after I discovered the concept of financial independence. I want to use what I have learned to help you avoid some of the financial mistakes that I have made while sharing some of the financial wins that I have had along the way. Join me as we discuss financial strategies to guide you to becoming a physician assistant on the way to financial independence. Welcome back, everyone, to the PA the FI Way podcast. I'm your host, Kat, and on today's episode, we have two returning guests. We have Shayne Foley and Jordan Fisher. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Thanks, Kat.
Hello, thank you.
So both of you folks have been returning guests, and I want to let the listeners know if they want to take a listen. Back in episode 16, Jordan was on discussing his book, PA Next Steps. Episode 37, both of you were on discussing the PA Blueprint, which is a book as well that you wrote together. And then back in episode 40, we had Shayne on, and he talked about sabbaticals. So if you haven't had a chance to take a listen to those episodes, make sure you go ahead and take a listen. But I'm really excited to talk about today's topic, and Shayne actually had a good idea to do this topic for today. So thanks for bringing it to the show. And we're going to be talking about Ramit Sethi's money rules. And Shayne, what prompted you to suggest this? Why do you feel like that this will be a good topic to talk about today?
Yeah, great question. So, Ramit is someone that a lot of us respect who are in the FI community. So someone who's definitely a trailblazer and really sort of embodies what a lot of us are doing. He's very actionable with how he does things and just provides a very simple framework. And with these money rules, this is a framework. This is his framework. This is what he sort of uses to live day by day, save, invest, etc. So I just found it super interesting, and reading through the list, sort of for myself saying, okay, yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. These are great. And some of them saying, well, that was not necessarily how I follow it or what I think. But that's the beauty of it, is that you don't have to agree with all of them. But this just provides a basic framework for people to potentially work off of, adopt for themselves and whatnot. So I thought maybe we could have a conversation about it and sort of compare how we do it ourselves. And then the audience can hear that and think for themselves in regards to what they might want to adopt, or maybe they'll hear some things from us that they haven't thought of and maybe want to try that out as well.
Great. I agree. I think that these rules will be really good discussion points, and the people who are listening can certainly decide if they agree 100% with them, or if they want to make modifications, or perhaps come up with their own set of money rules as well. If the listeners aren't familiar with Ramit Sethi, he is the author of a book as well as the host of the podcast that are both called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And they're both really good if you haven't had a chance to check them out. I will include a link to the book in the show notes as well for you. And then he was also featured on the Netflix series called How to Get Rich. Have you, Shayne, or you, Jordan, had a chance to watch that series at all yet?
I have. I'm not all the way through because my rule is I only watch it with my fiance, so I have to get her in the right mood to watch it. I would watch it straight through, but I have to find her at the right moments, because then I'm like, so what do you think about this? And it prompts some fun conversations.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I have not watched it. My Netflix binging has gone down dramatically since I had a child. So that's the main reason.
Your choice.
Yeah, that's totally understandable. And that is the life update that you've had since our last conversation, was that you've had a kiddo. And how old is he now?
15 months and growing.
That's super exciting.
Yeah.
Cool. And then Jordan, I believe that being engaged is an update as well for you too. So that's super exciting.
Yes. Oh yeah. And wedding planning currently. So I'm sure that'll come up today.
Yeah. Well, good luck with both of those things. That's big life changes for sure.
Yeah. Jordan, you bought a house too. Don't forget that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, nice.
House. Yeah. That's
Congrats
not in the
on
money
that.
Rules, and
you did all the things.
I don't know if it should be. Yes. The American dream. Got a dog too. So.
Oh, there you go. Nice. You guys are growing up.
We are right before
Right
your
before
eyes.
your eyes.
Yeah, I thought that Netflix series, How to Get Rich, was really good, especially for introducing the concept of financial independence and trying to build wealth, saving and investing, and paying off debt to people who aren't really in the financial independence community quite yet. I think it was a really good kind of introduction series for them. So I encourage
Did you
listeners
get your husband to watch it?
Yes, I did actually. He watched it and he thought it was good and, prompted good discussion points as well, too.
Nice.
Yeah. So let's first review what his 10 money rules are so that the listeners are up to speed and can identify what they are while we're having this conversation. So the first money rule that Ramit has is always have 1 year of emergency fund cash. And I'll give just a brief thought on this. I feel like that's a good rule for a lot of people to live by. I personally don't feel like you need a full year of cash, and that at least 3 months to 6 months is a good range to aim for. At the same time, though, having a full year does provide an extra safety net, and it can give you more freedom perhaps if you're thinking about leaving a job early or taking a sabbatical as you had, Shayne. So what are your guys' thoughts about that first rule?
Well, I mean, when we say cash, I mean, cash is the easiest and most liquid asset, right? So that's probably why he says cash specifically, but I suppose it could be, as long as it's accessible, I would potentially agree up to the 1 year, depending on your circumstances too. So you mentioned sabbatical for us and for other people, depending on how long, having that extra, 6 months for a total of a year is pretty critical. But yeah, I think I agree with you for the most part, Kat, with what you said. I think 6 months is adequate for most folks.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like even a year is a little daunting for somebody that thinks about this stuff all the time. And that comes at the sacrifice of other things, investing and whatnot, which I'm sure we'll get into. So I agree with you, Kat. I think a year is maybe a little excessive, but shoot, if I had that, I'd feel pretty good.
Yeah, it definitely would feel like it would put your mind at ease a little bit more, and again set yourself up for more options too, where you don't feel like you are pressured to stick around in a role that maybe you do want to leave a little bit earlier than what you were hoping for if you don't have a job fully lined up yet, or that you're still in the interviewing process or things like that. And then the second rule is save 10% and invest 20% of your gross annual income. So what are your guys' thoughts about that rule?
I mean, I like it a lot in that it's just, what I really like about his rules is they are relatively simple and actionable, which is kind of his brand, as Shayne had mentioned before. So I do like that. Could it be more specific? Yes, but like at the core, these are just very broad rules. So I think it's reasonable to say, hey, 30%, live on 70% of your income, the rest divert to investing and saving. So I think it's a nice, easy, simple step to start with. So
Yeah. So broadly speaking, like Jordan said, 30%, that's a great, percentage to save, invest. I mean, some people will be much higher than that, but at least we want to try to get 20, 30%. If that save 10% includes going towards the emergency fund and or large purchases, then I agree. That's probably a good amount. The invest 20%. I mean, that's really easy to do with your 401k or 403b alone. I mean, you could potentially hit close to that. So, or even above that if you're maxing it out. So not too challenging to do if you know what to do with your money. And so overall, yeah, I think 30% is pretty reasonable. And you're going to find people on, all ends of the spectrum here in regards to how much or what percentage they save and invest.
Yeah. And then the third rule is be able to pay in full for large expenses before spending. And he gives the example of things like your wedding, your dream honeymoon, a house, etc. So, Jordan, with your wedding planning coming up here, what are your thoughts about that rule?
I mean, again, I think broad strokes, it's smart. I like it. Is it realistic for me right now? Not necessarily, just because
Sure.
that doesn't factor in the time of things. Like life doesn't always like come in this structured style of this and then this and then this. opportunities change, life changes. And so I think shooting for that as much as you can is great, but you have to adjust for reality, and it may not be perfect.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a car could be included in that list. It's ideal if you can pay for a car in cash, but sounds like the vehicle market, even used vehicles, is pretty hot right now. And to find a good, reliable used vehicle, it sounds like they're pretty spendy right now. So you might not be able to even pay for a car fully in cash before you can buy it, especially if your previous one broke down. So I think that that's something to consider. And then I also thought it was interesting he included house in that list, which I don't think you need to pay for a full house in cash before you buy a house, because that would be quite daunting. And also mortgage rates, although they're higher than what they had been around COVID, they still aren't astronomically high. So, but generally, if you can pay for like a vacation or, a honeymoon or a new toy purchase or something like that in cash, then that certainly is ideal before trying to take out a bunch of loans and things like that too.
Yeah, maybe it might be smarter to like put a caveat and cap it at like 20,000 or
Sure.
something like that.
Yeah, that's a good thought.
This also too might tie back into number one with the year, and maybe, although it wouldn't fall under an emergency, like, if you had a year, that gives you more wiggle room to pull some of that and then start to replenish it over
Totally.
time. So whereas if you just had 6 months and then you had to pay for a wedding, that potentially is going to drop you by 50% of what you had. So now you only have 3 months, 2 months, etc. So I could see where, and you might want to get 6 to 12 months of an emergency fund, and that'll help with this a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that it brings up an excellent point that all of these things are suggestions, and personal finance is personal. So you need to make the choices that feel right for you in your current situation.
Absolutely.
And rule number 4 is never question spending money on books, appetizers, health, or donating to a friend's charity fundraiser. And I think that this is a pretty good rule to live by. I think that many of us can tend to be a little bit more frugal in nature and can find it hard to spend on those things. But I think it's a pretty good general rule overall.
Yeah, and anyone could put their own 4 little things in there, but those are great examples.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd put travel in there for myself, and books, health, those sort of things in there. I mean, he does appetizers. Yeah, that too. But donating and charitable giving, those sort of things are always great, and I agree. But it's easier said than done. Just in general, to not or to be less frugal. If you have decades of that under your belt, and that's how you go about the world, or how you have, it's more challenging, speaking from personal experience, than I thought it would be.
Yeah. And then the 5th rule is business class on flights over 4 hours. And I think this could be a good rule for a lot of people if they feel like they have the funds and want to enjoy a little bit of extra legroom, a little bit more perks or benefits. I generally, I'm a shorter individual, so I don't care too much about extra legroom. If it's a relatively short flight, like maybe 6 to 8 hours, but if it's a really long flight, maybe I would consider implementing this rule in the future.
Yeah, I got upgraded once because of a mistake by the airline, and I'll tell you, business class was amazing. It was everything I thought it would be, and 10 times more. But at the same time, when I see those price tags, I just sort of recoil. And again, going back to what I just said, frugal me is like, that can I really do? I really want to spend 4 times, 10 times the amount. And oof, I like it. I like the rule, because this is, again, part of Ramit's rich life that he wants to live. So I think we could all have our own version of that, perhaps something like that. But I mean, I love the example, but ask me if I'm going to be doing it anytime soon. Probably not.
Yeah, that's understandable. And then rule number 6 is buy the best and keep it as long as possible. And I think that, similar with all these rules, it depends upon what it is, but I think it's a really good rule to live by for several things where, if you can buy something that really provides a lot of value, you feel like you will use it a lot, very frequently, and it'll last for several years and be durable, then yes, go ahead and, buy the more expensive option and use it and keep it. Whereas other things in life, certainly the cheaper or moderate priced item can be just as good as the more expensive item.
Yeah, I feel like with this, like in order to make that happen, you have to do your research almost. I mean, especially all of us, I'm sure we're the same, that when we want to make a bigger purchase, we overthink it and wait and do all these things. And I think that naturally leads to that, so that it works out where you get good value.
Yeah.
The only thing I'll add to that is buy the best, and in parentheses after that, on Prime Day or Black Friday. that would be our rule. It's like,
Sure.
if we can wait until the times when which prices may go down, like then it appeases that frugal side too.
Totally valid. I like that. And then rule number 7 is no limit on spending for health, such as a personal trainer, or education, such as courses, events, etc.
Yeah, another great Ramit rule that fits very much with his brand and his personality. And I don't think any of us as healthcare professionals would argue about the health side of that, or the education for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on, perfect. I try to abide by that one for sure.
Yeah, I think it's a great rule to live by. Sometimes easier said than done, where you see the price tags and you're like, oh, do I really need to? But I think it's a really good thing that you just shouldn't be thinking twice about that necessarily. If it's really your health or your education that will advance your career or your side projects or things like that, it's a really good rule to live by. And then rule number 8 is earn enough to work only with the people I respect and like. And I think that that's a good one too, where you don't have to feel like you're pressured to stick around in a job that doesn't value you, or that you feel like is in a toxic work environment or things like that. So I really like that rule as well.
Yeah, and it ties back in with the emergency fund side of things that allows you to make these changes.
Totally. And then rule number 9 is prioritize time outside the spreadsheet. And Ramit is pretty famous for that rule and that line. He almost kind of pokes fun at people in the FIRE community, so financial independence, retire early, where they are so focused on living in the spreadsheet, being money nerds, running those numbers, and being so frugal and not living their rich life outside of the spreadsheet. So I think that that's an excellent rule to live by too.
Yeah, and I think that's been validated as of recent from just sort of listening to some, FI podcasts and reading some blog posts. Like Mad Fientist, I think, talks a lot about sort of having some regrets, right? Spending too much time in the spreadsheet. So actually, I think that one's holding up pretty well. And for folks who have crossed, quote unquote, the finish line and are retired or whatever, like I think a lot of them are reflecting back now and sort of saying, oh, maybe I would just have toned that back a little bit and still got to the same results. But enjoyed myself in the process more.
Definitely. I think it's so important that you prioritize your relationships with your family members, your friends, your significant others, as well as prioritize those experiences and hobbies leading up to financial independence. Otherwise, you could be burning bridges along the way and just not really enjoying life much until you get there. And then you're looking around and you're like, well, I don't really have many people in my life to be able to enjoy my current life with as well. So it's really important that you do live life outside of the spreadsheet. And then rule number 10, which is the last rule, is marry the right person. And I think that this is important. I think that if you can have some financial discussions when you're dating, then that can certainly be helpful. But if you're like me and many of us, you didn't really understand personal finance or financial independence until you're already married. And then you have to learn how to communicate with your spouse and have those discussions as well. So it is really important that you marry someone that you can get along with, that you communicate well with, and that you can work together on a common goal if marriage is your goal in life as well. What are your guys' thoughts?
Oh, 100%. Marriage is a partnership. And yeah, it is interesting to hear that versus like reflect on myself, where I know about this ahead of time, but also similar to you, somebody that's not like trying to live by it as much, and kind of working through that and figuring out where to compromise, and just making sure you're staying respectful throughout the process.
Yeah, I mean, as it relates to finances, it's nice when you're on the same page as your spouse, and whether they're coming into the relationship that way, or you can just talk it through and have these conversations openly. I mean, isn't it usually referenced that finances are the main reason for divorce, or like top three, I think, financial disagreements.
Yeah.
So it's good if you're getting that out of the way ahead of time. And then again, hopefully you're on the same page, but if not, at least you can have open conversations, see the value in things, and then perhaps meet halfway or whatever. But if someone's a huge spender and someone's very frugal, there are going to be a lot of sort of small and big problems that happen along the lines.
Yeah, definitely. It's important to just make sure that you're trying to work on your communication and be respectful of them and try to work together and figure out what your goals are together to work towards too. So now that we covered Ramit's 10 money rules, let's talk a little bit more about these. So I'm curious, out of his money rules, which one do you follow the most religiously, and what actions have you taken to ensure you don't break from it?
I think I do probably number 2, and that I think it's nice to have like a certain amount of your income like predetermined where it's going. Now, again, we talked about this a little bit before we started, in that like 10% saving and 20% investing, kind of what does that actually mean? But I think it really depends. Like if you're saving for a house, then it may be 25-5, you know. If life is good and you're just coasting along and you already have an emergency fund saved up, then it may be 5-25. It's going to change depending on your life, but I think that general goal of having X amount of the money you make predetermined to go to saving and investing is really simple and really smart, and pays off a lot. And Ramit talks about this a lot, and that automation is the key to that. And I couldn't agree more. Having that money come right out of your paycheck to go into your 401k is so clutch.
Definitely. It takes the mind work and guessing game and one extra task off of your giant to-do list if you just have everything automated. So I think that automation is huge for sure.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that's part of me and my money rule that I follow the most religiously here, which is the first one, which is always have 1 year of emergency fund cash. Now I'm going to give myself some play to say 6 to 12 months, as we were talking about earlier when we just went over it. So it ranges for us in my family. So 6 months if we're staying put and don't have any big purchases that we think we're going to do. And I'm going to put a sabbatical under a big purchase because we're not having any income typically at this point when we do those. So as of right now, I'll just say I have 12 months saved, and a little bit more than that even, because we don't really know exactly when, but we're going to pull the trigger at some point not too long down the line and do another sabbatical. So, but we're also sort of just looking at real estate too and going, oh, can we do a down payment and secure ourselves some housing and maybe an income stream there? So, but we follow that, and part of that is just us and wanting to sort of feel some sense of control if I lost my job or something changed, medical expenses, things like that. But I think back to the pandemic, and I have learned a lot throughout this process. And I just remember seeing so many PAs and other healthcare workers get laid off or furloughed or whatever it was. And those folks, some were paid and most of them were not. And so those sort of things, none of us want another, worldwide medical emergency to happen. But if it were, we have confidence that we could absorb that for at least 6 months and probably more. So like I said, number one, the emergency fund gives us a real boost of confidence. We feel very empowered having that sitting there in case we need it.
What about you, Kat? What's yours?
I feel like number 9 is the one that I currently most religiously live by. Prioritize time outside of the spreadsheet, where my husband and I have had this discussion multiple times where we feel like we need to save and invest for the future, but also enjoy life along the way. So we're trying to balance the two extremes there. But I feel like that number 4 is the one that I want to work on a little bit more, along with number 7, where these minor purchases like a book aren't that much money, but I know that it will bring me joy and I'll be educating myself, or if it's just reading for pleasure, it's a really good thing to do as well. and also just not feel guilty about, wanting to spend money on things like education or conferences or things like that too.
I could have sworn you were going to say business class. Told me again.
I'm not bougie yet. Maybe in 20 years.
It's hard to cross that threshold. That's what I was saying before. It's so hard, especially that one. I feel like that one, to me, of the rules is kind of the most extreme in my mind, right? I see that, I'm like, wow, ooh, and those are just probably deep rooted stuff. It says, am I worthy of business class? Am I that kind of person? Who sits in business class? Do I sit? There are big questions, I think, probably underneath that. But yeah, that one's the hardest one, I think.
I think so too, for sure. And then as a sidebar, Shayne, you mentioned a potential upcoming sabbatical. Do you have places you're scoping out, or is that still up in the air, or, not public knowledge yet?
I mean, there's no set departure date. I will say it is approaching and semi-rapidly approaching. That's all I can say, because my cards are not on the table yet with work. So
Sure.
Got to leave it a little broad here.
Sure.
But nonetheless, we're thinking about it. Planning stages are sort of initial, and we're doing our just sort of like life inventory assessment of who we have and what we want to do. So,
sure.
Long story short, we have a dog, so we're not going to leave our dog behind. So that restricts us from maybe doing some things that would be like top priority and more fun to us, but she's part of the team, so we got to figure it out. And we've got a little guy, as we were saying before, so we're just trying to figure out what would work best for the whole family. So that's the planning. There are some things we're dreaming up, but nothing is formalized, including the departure date yet. But all I know is it's happening semi soon.
Cool. Well, that's really exciting. I wish you guys the best with the planning stages, as well as when you finally get to that point, and looking forward to hearing the update.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And then going back to the money rules, which of them do you think that everyone should live by?
I'm going to be super boring and go back to number one again, the emergency fund, for the same reasons I was stating before, is that I think we should all have at least 6 months to fall back on. And whether that's just you've had it up to here, and that can be your money to say, see ya, I have the money to absorb this, I'm going to find something better. Or whether it's because of some sort of emergency thing you didn't expect. I just think it's really, really important to have. And I can't reference the exact numbers, but it's a high percentage of folks can't even come up with whatever it is, $500 or something. Yeah. I mean, it's the majority. And so that is a place that I don't want to be. As PAs and healthcare workers, most of us get paid decently to well. And so hopefully if you play your cards right and do things correctly, then you'll have that for whatever comes your way.
That's great.
I'm going to say number 10, marry the right person. And that's, I feel like, really important, in that we all talk about investments and how important this is. And I don't think there's a worse investment than marrying the wrong person and then going on to get divorced.
Sure.
So trying not to screw that up.
Well said, sir.
Yeah, I think we can all identify that that's a really important rule. And like you said, there's fewer things that are worth investing in than your relationship with your significant other. And then which of these rules do you feel like is the most important for those who are more financially naive, just learning about financial independence, as opposed to those who, understand personal finance, saving and investing, and are more financially savvy overall?
Number 1, start with just having some savings. Like Shayne said, so many people can't even absorb a little emergency, let alone a big one. So, all we hear about is people living paycheck to paycheck. So if you can just learn not to do that and save 200, 300, 400, 500 and go from there, that's such an easy first step, but such an important first step to changing everything. And to take it one step further, put it in a high yield savings account, which are great right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was thinking, the emergency fund, so the 12-year or the 12-month, 12-year would be great too.
Yeah,
That would be
right.
sweet. The 12-month emergency fund,
It's a long
Yep, that's
sabbatical.
what I was thinking.
keep it going, baby. That's the ultimate goal. Pays
Around
for
the world
itself.
sabbatical.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah.
And then number two, save 10%, invest 20%, and then be able to pay in full. So, for the reasons we've mentioned already, but build that emergency fund. Hopefully you are continuing to automate money into it. And then on top of that, you're investing. So in this case, it says 20%, which I think is a good goal. But then trying not to get yourself deeper into debt as you're paying that down, right? So that's a huge step back. If then all of a sudden you're putting your wedding on a credit card or a new car or whatever, and then taking on more debt. So we're trying to move forward, and it's not always going to be super linear, but you don't want to take huge steps back by putting, taking on more debt as well. So I think if you were to not sort of do number three or some version of trying to pay for things in full, you're only going to be shooting yourself in the foot, or at least like if one of you sort of, FI terms, like just sort of, elongate your date or make it, later your fire date.
Yeah, that's understandable. And then what are some newer rules that you are each adopting for yourselves? And then how are you also implementing those rules?
I am trying to have multiple income streams. I feel like we talk so much about saving and investing and all that things, and that's great. But also earning more money is great and helpful to meet those goals. And so many people, most of us are just focused on our one job, our one W-2, and that's great. But people like us are trying to have multiple streams, right? You with PA, the FI way, and us with PA Blueprint. So I think trying to figure that out more and more between this, our jobs, real estate, precepting, teaching, all these things. Nothing gets me more fired up than looking at like my monthly Excel sheet and being able to put, oh, here's my salary, but also here's the extra income I earned. I feel like that's so rewarding. So having as many of those as possible is definitely like my new rule.
That's great. I believe the stat that I recall reading is the average millionaire has an average of 7 income streams. Have you guys seen that or heard that?
Wouldn't surprise
No, but it
me.
makes
Yeah,
sense.
wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Yeah. And I'm sure one of those would be like the dividends off of your investments and, things like that too. But yes, it's nice to be able to kind of dabble and try different things out and see what sticks and see where you can feel like you're getting purpose and fulfillment, but also earning a little bit of income on the side too.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with that. So glad to hear Jordan saying the same thing. And obviously, as business partners, we had a similar mindset a while ago. But the multiple income streams is definitely a piece that's really piqued my interest. And I just don't want to be a paycheck employee. Again, for a lot of the same reasons I've already mentioned. But I also want to get to a point of FI as quickly as possible without, falling victim to, number 9 and keeping my nose in the spreadsheet too much, but see if I can move things along a little bit faster. I think that's a great goal to have. And so, I mean, that's one of my rules. We have, I'll talk specifics. I don't care. I mean, my wife and I have an agreement where any discretionary spending above $50, we just tell each other, just have a quick conversation,
Sure.
where it's like, well, I don't really need this, but I want this. What are your thoughts? It's $100. And my wife, I mean, we almost always say, great, go for it. Sounds good. But sometimes we ask each other a question like, well, do you need that?
Yeah.
When will you use it? Like it's just enough to hesitate and go, like right now I'm like, I've gone back and forth. Should I get a Kindle because I want to read more? Will that make it easier? But then my wife is like, well, do you have the time to read right now? I'm like, no, actually.
That's valid.
So that was a perfect example of like, it's,
Point
yeah,
covered.
like it's not too much money to spend on that thing, but it's like, actually, I might not use it that much. So it's just that pause. But again, 99% of the time it's, yeah, sure, go for it. Sounds great. So that's one of ours. Another one is trying to loosen our purse strings a little bit on the things that we value, living our rich life and what that looks like. So we're just trying to, learn how to do that. That is actually part of this process too. It's much easier to go with a framework I already know, which is kind of be frugal and save and invest. And I'm good with that. And that feels great. The spending piece still doesn't quite feel right to me on certain things. So we're trying to implement that. And then lastly, I just do this thing where I'm always watching our checking account. So not too much time, but just usually once a month. And any excess, I just sort of send off to our high yield savings account or put in investing. So I just it's almost like old school, like, check balancing, account balancing, but I project forward and then I see, okay, for the month, looks like we're going to be up, $500. I'm going to take 100. So I'm still being safe in case anything else comes up, and I'm going to siphon that off to high yield savings account or investing.
Yeah.
So just a little bit like that. And some of it's already automated, like to our son's 529. Like some of these things are already happening, but I just try to even do $50 here, $500 there.
That's great. It probably doesn't take you too much time or too much bandwidth mentally to do that, but it very likely will be adding up and compound over time. So that's awesome that you're doing that.
Yeah.
And then what are some unorthodox financial rules and traditions that you each follow?
I used to be better at this, and like I said, with the saving and investing, all that, you have to adjust for life and live outside the spreadsheet. But I think for as long as you can, specifically after school, it's keep that housing cost as low as you can and live as close to work as you can. Both those are huge, and take care of your two of the three biggest expenses, in housing and transportation. So that was a hack I did for the first 3 years out of PA school, and it allowed me to really hit my student loans hard. So
Cool.
that was key.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we've tried to do, and we're doing it right now, in a trip we're trying to take. We have, again, specifics are more interesting for your audience. So we're trying to go to Portland, Maine and see the band Camp. I really want to see them. And it's just kind of expensive, to go because it's Labor Day weekend and it's only a couple weeks away. And we're like, how do we afford this? Because if we're saying, like, can we afford this? The answer is yes, but then it's not motivating. Like, we don't have to think more about it. Instead, it's like, how can we afford this? So we're looking at our credit card miles and points and trying to figure out the best way that still feels good, that we're not, dropping this huge amount to go to this place and do this thing. In the end, we might still go because that might be part of our rich life and we're just going to do it. But it's a better question to say, like, how can we afford this? And most of the time we can come up with an answer in which it actually is significantly less expensive or some sort of way to just make something work. And so that's one. Sometimes we don't do it all the time, but sometimes, again, with discretionary spending, if it's not something where we're buying for $2,000, like a mountain bike or something, we will take the equivalent. So let's just use $50 and then also donate $50 as well. Because we feel like, well, we're buying something we don't really need, but just we want. It feels good to also donate. So let's take the equivalent and do that. And so sometimes we kind of just do that, and that feels good as well. So that's something that, again, not 100% of the time, but we do. I just feel like if I can spend this money right now, I need to also look at that same pot of money and say, what could I potentially give as well?
Sure.
So we do that a little bit. And then lastly, our sabbaticals, we save and spend now on those. That's definitely unorthodox, because I think a lot of people would have a hard time sort of recognizing the investment in ourselves that we're doing, and trying to live our lives as we go and not just waiting, to get to FI and then all of a sudden the doors open and, we can do what we want. But instead we're trying to do it at certain intervals and whenever we can.
Yeah, I really love the idea of sabbaticals. For a lot of people, can help with burnout, but also the fact that once you reach FI, hopefully you're still young and healthy, but you don't know what your body will be like, or your spouse's body, or things like that as well. So it's ideal to try to enjoy those experiences now along the way and not just try to reserve or save them all for once you reach FI. So I really like that you do that. And then what are your guys' rules when it comes to debt, would you say?
Well, we all know it's bad, but it's also a reality of life. I mean, shoot, and anyone that's a PA that's listening to this, I got to think that 90% of us had to take on some loans at some point. So inherent to our careers, we started with that. So accepting that it is a reality to a point is key. What I learned early on, at least playing the game with student loans, is interest rate is everything. And that's, I mean, it took me a while to like put this in my head, but it's like, obviously when your investments are earning 7% interest, that's fantastic. And the inverse of that is when you're paying 7% on your loans, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, wow, that is a lot of money. So playing the game, I did not predict the pandemic, stupidly enough. So I refinanced my loans from government to private. But
Sure.
throughout that process, I learned the game and could get interest rates really, really low. And you can do that with everything as long as you're thinking about it and knowing that's an option. So I think that's key to getting out of debt, is having really low interest rates on the debts that you do have.
Yeah, definitely. Jordan, do you tend to follow the avalanche method then instead of snowball method when you're paying off your debt? Or does it just kind of depend upon what your goal or priorities are at that time, which one you want to pay off the most?
Yeah, I think the avalanche, and that changes, right? Like if I can, like at one point my student loans were at 5.5%, and now they're down to less than 2%.
Sure.
And it's like, that is way off the avalanche, right? It's my biggest amount, my biggest debt, but at the same time, it's so low. I'm going to focus in other places. So yeah, I definitely still play that game and adjust accordingly.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned the avalanche method. That was one of my rules for debt. Is avalanche method. We like it better, feels better. I like to take the big bites first. So it's right on there. So happy you mentioned that.
Great minds, Shayne.
Yeah, great minds, totally, for sure. And then another one I had on here was just avoiding debt if you can, but sometimes you can't, and that is absolutely fine.
Revolutionary thinking from Shayne Foley.
Right, exactly. So I mean, we're not afraid of debt, but we just minimize it. Certain things like bigger purchases, we don't have the cash to use, and so we're going to have to take on debt. Like, for instance, if we get a mortgage, pick up an investment property, something like that. So totally good with that. That is absolutely fine. But other things like everyday spending, credit cards, like we're paying that off every month in full. I cannot name a single month probably in the last 5 years that we have not paid in full. I mean, it's just how we do it. Again, going back to the emergency fund, if we have to, we move just a little bit over only to replenish it the next month. So yeah, paying those credit cards off. And so we get the advantages of the miles and everything else. And they don't get much of anything from us.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think that it's ideal to recognize that debt can get you a lot of places in life. Like some student loan debt can be good for our careers, for example. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of that. I think student loan debt's astronomical. It's way too high in my opinion, but we don't need to touch that during this discussion. But anyway, moving on with debt. So some debts can get you, good places. Like you mentioned, real estate investing. Maybe you do go into a little bit of debt to have a rental property that's a long-term rental or a short-term rental, but you are generating income smartly with that debt and you're using it as leverage. So unlike what Dave Ramsey preaches, I would say I don't agree that all debt is 100% bad, but at the same time, it still doesn't feel good no matter what type of debt. I feel like, at least I haven't done real estate investing, but maybe people who do that, they're like, oh, I don't mind that I have, several $100,000 or $1 million worth of debt in my real estate investments. Maybe they don't mind at all because they are generating so much cash flow. So I think it is important to recognize that it's on the individual level and what feels good to you about how you approach debt.
Yeah, those are all great points, Kat. And I think on your way up, if I could use that term, like on your way to building something, building real estate or just your investments, most of us have to take on debt. I mean,
sure,
we're just in a place where we don't have that kind of cash to be throwing around. But as you grow and build, and potentially you can avoid debt. But when you're starting out, especially when you're first starting out with your career, I mean, most of us have some sort of debt. We just don't have that kind of cash lying around. You have to accumulate it. You have to earn it, however you're going to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And then we've touched on this a little bit already, but if you have more thoughts to add, what are your rules when it comes to having an emergency fund and building it and utilizing it and things like that?
Shayne talked about this a little bit earlier about just liquidity, right? Cash is obviously the most liquid. But for me, I like to have multiple things in play. So having money to pull out of your HSA, especially if you have like saved receipts and you can pull that money out tax free. There's that shoebox method game. So having cash and then HSA is maybe the second or third. And then like worst comes to worst, you can pull out of your Roth if you need to. So just having multiple layers of emergency protection, I feel like is really big for me. And because emergency funds, especially cash, will fluctuate, and that's just life. So just make sure you're protected at multiple levels. So if you're exposed in one area, you have some safety elsewhere.
Yeah, I think that's great to utilize different buckets when it comes to emergency fund if you can, and recognize that your contributions to a Roth IRA technically can be part of your emergency fund if you want to, because you don't get penalized if you pull out your contributions. You would get penalized if it's the growth over time. So like you said, if push comes to shove, maybe you do tap into that. Ideally, if you're doing well and you're not having a true emergency come up, you want to leave your money invested to be able to grow over the years. But I think that's a good rule to think about too, that you could consider that as part of your emergency fund if you want to. What are your thoughts, Shayne?
Two things I was thinking about with this. One main one overarching is, don't touch the emergency fund unless we have to. But for us, it's a little different because of the sabbaticals. We kind of have to be liquid to do that. And so we have a threshold. We have our 1 year of spending. We average out about $50,000 in spending per year. So we know we need at least that for a sabbatical, or that's what we think we need. So don't go below 6 months at any time, whether it's a sabbatical year or not. And then anything significant, like 125% above what we need. So I don't know, like that math would be $62,500 actually. So anything above that, again, siphon off and put it to work. So that could be a high yield savings account, but don't let it just sit there. If there's, if I'm getting, a certain amount for a high yield savings account, but I can go ahead and then invest it into a brokerage account and still have pretty reasonable access to it, and I'm getting 7%, then I'm going to move it. I don't want it to just sit there idle. And so we kind of have an absolute top end in which everything should go and be invested or go somewhere else. And then we have a bottom end in which not to go below.
Cool. Nice. And then what do you feel like your rules are when it comes to PA jobs in general, whether you're searching for a new one or your current PA job? What are your rules when it comes to PA jobs?
Oh, so many. Living in Colorado has been interesting. Now I just have the viewpoint of Colorado, but just seeing how important salary is in terms of lifestyle and your location, and everything, and how some places you have a lot more bargaining power or negotiation power, and other places not. But just making sure that you are being reasonably compensated. Like we help a lot of new PAs with like contract negotiation, and just look at a lot of contracts. And sometimes you'd be amazed on how much employers think they can get away with paying PAs, and it's a little disheartening. We as a whole need to continue to grow on that, and I feel like the AAPA salary report is helpful, but there's still other things that need to be done. So when it comes to PA jobs, salary is super important, and that needs to be remembered. But also production pay is key. I think as a new grad, right, you just want your job, you want a paycheck and all these things. But as you get more experience, more efficient, certainly the physicians, or most of the time, they're getting rewarded for working hard and seeing more patients. And I think PA should be the same way. So finding a job that rewards you for that, because if you don't, again, once you've been doing this for a while, it can be pretty frustrating.
Yeah, I've had roles where I'm paid straight on RVUs. So the more patients I see, the more complicated the visits are, the more I get paid ultimately. I think it's more common to actually have a base salary plus RVU bonus type of structure. And then I'm currently paid on a percentage of collection. So that's also a situation where the more patients I'm seeing and the more complexity, once the clinic gets compensated from insurance or from the patients, then I get paid a certain amount. So there are different ways that this can look to be compensated for your productivity, but I feel like that it is nice. On the other hand, I have heard arguments about, well, if you just get paid a really good salary, why should it matter, your production? And that can be a valid approach too, again, if you are truly fairly compensated and a really great salary. But I feel like it can be more motivating a little bit to be paid on production, and can almost like reassure my brain in the sense of, wow, I saw a ton of patients today, but at least I'll get paid a little bit more today, So I think there's that viewpoint as well on that.
Yeah. I mean, at my current position, the physicians are under that model, but the PAs are not. So I understand if you're compensated appropriately, sure. But when it's the inverse relationship where the provider wants to see more and more and you're attached to them and you're helping
Sure.
them, and the more they see, the less you make in terms of like the more work you have to do, the more hours you have to spend. Like that to me is just mind boggling how that's a thing, because our brains are pretty simple, right? We need to be rewarded for working hard.
No, that's valid. I think that, yeah, if you are in a specialty where you do work alongside a physician counterpart that closely versus more autonomy or more have your own patient panel or things like that, then yes, that's very valid, especially if you're getting more duties placed on you and expected to be there longer hours, or again, push for more and more and more, but then your compensation's not being replaced or boosted to reflect that, then I agree that doesn't seem like it's very fair or reasonable.
Well, I will throw in some of my thoughts here when it comes to PA jobs. I mean, I wrote here negotiate for more right away. Like whether you're a new grad or this is your third job, doesn't matter. Try to negotiate, get as much as you can from the jump.
Yeah.
And then as you are settling into the role, learn what your metrics are, how you're being measured on things, and how you could potentially earn more, right? Or be more productive. Let's start there and be more productive. That doesn't always mean more patients. That could mean just better patient satisfaction scores or however. Again, you got to learn the metrics and then go to the negotiation table again and try to get your raise. And when you get that raise, pretend that raise never happened and invest that difference, whether it's 5,000, 10,000, or do something great with it, whatever that is for you. Basically going back to living your rich life with that, and then just repeat, just go ahead again, back to the start, try to figure out how to earn more. And then you just sort of keep leveling up your compensation. Then when you move jobs, hopefully they, will match what you were making before or even sort of go above that. And so it all matters, and it keeps you motivated too, I find anyway, if there's the potential for a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow of, working hard for 6 months or working smarter, doesn't have to be harder, and then getting that raise and then just, again, filing it away, investing it, here I go. That's part of my journey.
Yeah, that's great. I think that negotiation is such a huge topic that we aren't really taught very much in PA school, and even throughout our career, that is put on the side burner. Like, just try to get a good job. Who cares about negotiation and trying to get more either when you're starting your new job or at the 6-month or 12-month point in your new role, where you can negotiate many different things besides just the salary. So I think that negotiation really is key, and that it's important to empower PAs out there to feel like they can negotiate.
Yeah. I mean, we have competing interests somewhat, right, with our employers, which is they would probably prefer to pay us as little as they have to do as much work as possible. That for them is the ultimate thing. And for us, I'm not saying that all of us want to just sit around and, sip coffee, sip lattes over the course of the day, but, we would prefer not to burn ourselves out. So we prefer to get paid as much as possible to do the minimum amount of work or the amount of work that we can handle that's not going to burn us out. So, I mean, there's way more likely your employer coming to you and saying, hey, we need to increase productivity. We're behind on, by this many millions of dollars in our budget. So we need you to see one more patient per day. Like that's just probably going to happen at some point. So we might as well assume that's happening. So let's try to balance that out by trying to increase our salaries as well, because they're going to, again, sort of try to turn on the dial up a little bit to get you to see more patients. So you got to turn the dial up to get paid more too, to
Yeah.
balance that. Because otherwise they'd be super stoked for you to just go ahead and be more productive and get paid the same.
Yeah, agreed. And then I'm curious because we're talking about Ramit's 10 money rules. He always uses the term rich life and encourages you to figure out what your rich life looks like. So, what would each of your rich life look like?
Let's see here. So I try to be a little bit specific. Starting from the beginning, I think right now I do not want to work 5 days a week, and that's not because I'm lazy. It's just because I want to do other things. Like I think it's so important to have multiple other interests, whether it's being outside or for me it's biking. But and just doing another business, but it's getting out of the 9 to 5 doing the same job all day every day. So, and that's very feasible in the PA world. So don't work 5 days a week. For me, the eventual goal is to get to part-time work, and that's again because I want to work, I want to use my brain, I want to do all these things, but I want to be able to do whatever I want when I want to do it. So I think I tend to like move. For me, FI sometimes seems really, really, really tough to attain. So I'm more trying to settle on the part-time work for at least this point in my life, because maybe in 20 years I'll feel different. But so there's that. There's for me trying to start a process of or a tradition of annual international travel. Or at least every other year would be great. So starting there, I have a lot of negative feelings about eating out right now, and I don't want to feel that way. I want to feel like, oh, let's try this new Indian place. Fantastic. I don't want to stress about that, and I definitely do right now. And like Shayne said, that could just be the frugal part of me, but at the same time, that's something me and my partner really, really enjoy. So there's that. Teaching in some shape or form, again, having a part-time job that allows me to do teaching on the side, or whether that is my primary gig, who knows. And then like we had talked about before, just having multiple streams of income, and then albeit hopefully passive as time goes on. I think all those things are huge for me.
Awesome. Those sound like wonderful goals. And like you said, you can probably implement several of them pretty quickly here for you, but also have several that are in the future. So that's a great list. What about you, Shayne?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have a MO right now, modus operandi, that I'm really trying to lock in here, and that's increased flexibility with work, and then increased mobility in life. So that's kind of how I boiled it down, and just talk briefly about what those mean to me, and that's basically our rich life in a nutshell. But the work flexibility, like I really want to just sort of remove myself here from an office having to be in a physical location. So obviously that, one thing would be remote work or something of the sort. So maybe it's just less clinical time, or maybe it's remote work still clinical, or maybe it's non-clinical remote work, whatever it's going to look like. But I have a little envy. My wife has done this really nice transition from being a school teacher to doing some work from home stuff, supporting other teachers who are
Sure.
still in the classroom, but she's doing all this from home. And it's really opened my eyes to see her still doing teaching and education, but doing it from home and having that flexibility. And so I'm really hoping that I can sort of line myself up with something similar in the future. And there's, in regards to mobility in life, like we don't necessarily want to be nomads moving all the time, but I also am sort of now questioning our, like, it was historically like a 5 to 7 year interval for a sabbatical. So a lot can happen in 5 years. I mean, if you go back 5 years, a lot has happened in the world and in our lives. And so I don't want to wait that long. So hopefully we can integrate more small things in as we go. And again, that sort of lends itself best and easiest to the work flexibility, if we decide to work or not. So we're working towards that. I'm trying to understand for myself what that looks like, and for our family. But I mean, I also too live in a ski town, and I see people, I don't know what they're doing for work, but they look like they're always on the ski mountain or on the mountain bike trails, and they're around my age. And so I'm just like, what do you do for work here? So I have a little envy of the retired folks as well, who can go ski every day of the week if they want to. And so just working towards that, just changing our life a little bit. So more to come on that as time goes. But how about you, Kat? We'd love to hear, and I'm sure your audience would love to hear, what your rich life is.
Yeah, I think that both of you touched on pieces that make up what my rich life looks like. So definitely the flexibility is huge. Having the option to work remotely. I work in telepsychiatry right now, which I really love working from home currently. And as you had touched on, Jordan, too, part-time work. I do work part-time currently. Being able to educate, whether that's with PA the FI way or traditional PA programs. I really enjoy education and teaching future PAs and current PAs as well. And a lot of that comes down to feeling fulfillment and purpose in life too, trying to pass along information and try to make it more simple and easy to understand too. And then travel is a huge piece as well. I really enjoy traveling both domestically and internationally. So basically combined what the two of you said is a lot of what my rich life looks like as well. And then I would add just continuing to be able to spend a lot of time with family. I do currently have the luxury to be able to do that because our family does live close by, and my mom is super kind and she uses part of her retirement pension to sometimes fund family trips here and there, so I love that she's able to do that for our family. And I'm hoping that I'm able to do that in the future with nieces and nephews, or if we have kiddos down the road and things like that, to be able to really use the wealth that we build to be able to fund experiences and memories over time versus, only things as well. So I think that your guys' rich lives look awesome, and I'm excited to see what comes of it. But thanks for sharing those.
Yeah, thanks for sharing yours.
No, thank you.
And I really appreciate you both taking the time to have this conversation today about what Ramit's money rules are, what our thoughts are about them, and encourage the listeners to think about those money rules or create their own and change them to what looks like would work best for their lives. So if the listeners would like to connect with you or follow you on social media, how could they do so?
thepablueprint.com is our website. Check it out. We actually recently updated it, so it's looking new, looking fresh. We're at the PA Blueprint on Instagram, and certainly Shayne is probably the most active on LinkedIn, but me too to a lesser extent.
Yeah, so those are all great places to message us. Yeah, so pablueprint.com is probably the best place to start, and that'll get you connected to us, or find us on LinkedIn. That's also a good spot.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to have this conversation. I think it was full of really good information, and hopefully we'll have future conversations as well. So thanks again, Shayne and Jordan.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Kat.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you decide to continue to join me along this journey of becoming a PA the FI way. Please take a moment to press the subscribe button on the platform that you are listening to this on, but more importantly, consider sharing with another current or future PA that could benefit from the information that we reviewed in this episode. Take care and have a great rest of your day. Until next time. I'm sorry, that's funny.
I put it on silent.
Sure you did.
Sure you did, Jordan.
I put on do not disturb. I put on silent. That's
Jordan, you're
impressive.
the only one that I've had like a blooper thing at the end of the podcast too, with your fiance or girlfriend coming in. So I'm not surprised that happened.
Yeah, staying on brand. That's
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, right.
Sorry.
Was that
No,
Russia
it's good.
calling, Jordan? Your comrades?
They're already interfering.
My goodness.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny.